Well, man, the last 2 days have been absolutely incredible. And today we are going to rip the cover off the ball. You're at the right place at the right time for you. This is your fork in the road, your moment. Just drink it in. I get the privilege of introducing the first speaker today. And he sits on the board for the alumni for the NFL. He also personally coaches Dana White from the UFC. He put the first clinic inside the UFC, Ultra Performance, Peak Performance. Works with David Beckham, many soccer players in the house. He is David Beckham's coach. He's an elite superstar in the world of health. The first time I heard him about 7 months ago, I was just mind blown. I personally believe Gary Brecka will change the face of humanity. He's going to touch the world. You're going to be just blown away with what you're about to hear. I cannot wait to have him on the stage. But let's introduce him by way of video. Here we go. Grab a seat. We're going to.
My name is Gary Brecka. I'm a human biologist and biohacker. And over the last 20 years, I have become obsessed with the physiology of the human body and how we can optimize its form, function, and performance. I wasn't always on the side of optimal health. My career began on the opposite side, as I worked for more than 20 years in the insurance industry as a mortality expert predicting death to the month. Eventually, I realized there were living human beings on the other side of these spreadsheets and all of this data, and that I could see what risk factors were present keeping people from living longer, healthier, disease-free lifetimes. This realization was the tipping point, and it changed my career forever. That's when 10X Health was born. As I've researched, traveled, and studied the world's leading pioneers in anti-aging and optimal health, I've unlocked the secrets of human performance, and I've led thousands of human beings on their journey to true limitless human potential. Because we are not just meant to live, we are meant to thrive. And today, I'm blessed to share this journey with all of you.
Man, I am excited to be here with this build team, EXP 2022. Give it up for the Brecka family and this entire production team. Yeah. Guys, my name is Gary Brecka. I'm a human biologist, researcher, and a biohacker. I always have a funny little situation when I get on stage because as soon as I tell people what I used to do, they become more interested in that than what I do today. So I'll just get that out of the way real quick. For 22 years, I was a lead mortality researcher for the insurance industry, which meant if I got 5 years of medical records on you and 5 years of demographic data, I could tell the insurance company how long you had to live to the month. And it didn't matter if you were 82 years old and terminally ill, or if you were 25 years old and perfectly healthy, no pathology, no disease, not taking any pharmaceuticals, and had perfect blood work. I could zero in on exactly how many more months you had left on Earth. The population database that I had access to was the largest population database in the world, 370 million lives, and if it could see the light of day, it never will, it would permanently change the face of humanity. But while I was predicting death, I began to have an epiphany. I began to realize, after spending more than a decade in this industry, that there were human beings on the other side of these spreadsheets, that it wasn't just data. I wasn't able to remove myself from the fact that I had no impact on their lives, and I was prohibited by law from contacting the patient or contacting the treating physician, even if I saw life-threatening drug interactions. And I was actually threatened before with prosecution for reaching out to patients to try to help them live a longer, healthier, happier life. So I decided to resign from that industry and spend the balance of my lifetime touching the face of humanity, teaching people how to live healthier, happier, longer, disease-free lifetimes. And I am not stupid enough to think that I can do this on my own, but I am smart enough that to know that I can do it with all of you. So thank you. We're going to build an army today. I'm going to weaponize you to go out and teach people how to live longer, healthier, happier lives. I'm going to dispel some of the biggest modern myths in medicine, and I'm going to prove to you right here from this stage that I could take any disease, any pathology, any ailment that a human being suffers from, and right here from this stage, I will tell you what raw material is missing in their body so you can replace it and watch that condition eviscerate. You guys ready to do it? Awesome. So this is one of those mortality predictions. I hate showing this slide. It reminds me of a bad time in my life. But I'll tell you, it was like sitting behind a thick glass wall and just watching blind people walk into traffic. The myths that we have been fed about modern medicine and optimal health, we're going to blow through a lot of these today. But I have a saying. If I boiled 22 years of clinical research down to one sentence, this is the most impactful sentence that you will hear in terms of how long you have left on this earth. Your waking energy, the depth of your delta wave of sleep, your response to exercise, your hormone balance, your cognitive function. This is the single most important sentence that I think you will hear for the balance of your lifetime, and it is that the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. Nothing is more true than that statement. People say, Gary, how did you zone in on death to the month so accurately? I put that person on a hypoxic curve. You see, every human being in this room will leave this earth the same way. The definition of death is lack of oxygen to the brain. It's called hypoxia. Although we tend to think of it as an event, a gunshot wound, a bust, a heart attack, a stroke. But the truth is, everyone in this room is on a curve, a hypoxic curve. You are either managing oxygen well or you are managing oxygen poorly. The better you are managing oxygen, the longer, the healthier, the happier your lifetime will be. The more poorly, the earlier the onset of disease and all forms of pathology, and the earlier you will succumb to it. So for the balance of my talk today, I'm going to teach you what we can do to turn this around and set it in your favor. Woo! Dude, I like you guys, man. I get energy from this stuff, man. This is my drug of choice. Woo! Yeah, let's go. Love you guys. This is amazing. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, we're going to dispel some of these myths, and I'm going to give you an exercise to do today that will permanently change the trajectory of your life. Because most of the people that are sitting in this room are suffering from something, and about every person in this room, I bet you are operating at about 65% of your total potential. And I'm going to push it to 100 because we were meant to thrive. God put us on this earth to thrive. Yeah. No one came here to be average. And no one's going to leave here being average. So during this journey, I discovered two things in the mortality space. One, that the presence of oxygen was the absence of disease. The second was that disease and pathology, as we know it today, does not exist the way that we think it does. You see, we've gotten away from the faith in mankind and the faith in the human body and faith in human beings and the power of this to heal this. Right? There are 32 trillion cells in the body. Every day that you wake up, 300 billion cells that were with you this morning will not be with you tomorrow. Which means, write this down, November 7th is the most important day of the life in everybody in this room. Write down that day, and I'll tell you why. Because on November 7th, of the 300 billion cells that replicate every single day in your body, on the 7th of November, not a single living cell that's in your body at this moment will be with you today. So it does not matter what you are facing. Mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. It does not matter what ailment you have. It doesn't matter what your body morphic image is. In 84 days, all 32 trillion cells will have renewed. And it depends on what energy, what frequency, what nutrition we send to those cells as to what kind of human being you will be on November 7th. All right? So I'm going to make you, who wants to be a superhuman? Okay. Well, let's go. So, on this journey, I make a big, bold promise, and I'm going to make it to you guys today. If you do what I ask you to do today, it will add 7 years to the lifespan of everyone in this room. It will add not just 7 years to your lifespan, it will add 7 years to your health span. That is a fact. I know it because I researched it for 22 years. So along this journey, I developed a mechanism to actually take people from where they are now into a state of optimal health, which starts with a genetic test, which I'm going to explain in a minute. I'm going to talk about IV therapies. You do not have to do these with me. Every one of you lives close to locations that actually do IV therapies, and I'm going to talk about specifically which ones can reverse the aging process, biologics, and something called the superhuman protocol. And my journey, when it really began to scale, it began with meeting a patient of mine named Grant Cardone. Now, how many of you guys know who Grant Cardone is? Okay, yeah. So it began with Grant Cardone, and I wanted Grant Cardone to do a test, to do a genetic test, because I wanted to look at these biomarkers, because remember what I said was that everything that human beings face is just a deficiency, a lack of raw material in their body. We developed so many myths around modern medicine. I mean, how many of you know someone or know a family that's been affected by Alzheimer's or dementia? Does anybody know that the United States remains one of the few civilized nations in the world continuing to call Alzheimer's and dementia? Does anyone know what it really is? It's type 3 diabetes. It's insulin resistance in the brain. In 22 years, I didn't see a single early onset Alzheimer's demented patient that did not have 10 years of elevated blood sugar prior to. And we developed a lie about this disease, that patients are losing their memory. That's not true. They are losing access to their memory. And access can be restored. Right? You see, the brain is such a voracious consumer of carbohydrate that 45% of all the carbohydrates we put into the body are consumed by the brain. Right? The brain is nasty. The brain is like the little Kim Jong-un of dictators. It just sits up there and takes everything for itself. Right? If it wants calcium, it'll leach it from the bone. If it wants amino acids, it'll strip it from lean muscle tissue. And if it wants sugar, it will activate a nasty little receptor called the TAS1R2 receptor at the back of your tongue, and it will give you a dopamine reward for feeding it sugar. Most of us don't like sugar. Most of us are addicted to it. Right? There are entire laboratories in the United States of America full of PhDs dedicated to nothing but the study of one receptor on the back of the tongue, trying to create dopamine addiction in the population to drive food sources as their preference. And this is a fact. If you Google it, TAS1R2, it surges dopamine into the brain when we eat sugar. So what I wanted him to do is I wanted him to do this test, and he actually ended up having a close friend of ours that was going to make an investment in his fund, and he said, listen, Grant, I'll make the investment as long as you do this one test, this genetic test. And what this gene test does, and I'm going to encourage every single person in this room to take this test, and here's why. There are 5 genes in your body that determine what raw materials enter your body and are converted into the usable form. You see, there's not one compound that's known to mankind, not one, that you put into the human body that is used in the format that you put it in. Everything that enters the human body has to be converted into its usable form. It's almost like we pull crude oil out of the ground. But you know you can't put crude oil into your gas tank, right? The car doesn't understand that fuel source. Crude oil has to be refined into gasoline, and now the car can run. If you cannot refine a raw material into its usable form, you have a deficiency. When you have a deficiency, this is what leads to pathology and disease. I stood in front of a room almost this size full of physicians, and I asked this question. If there are any doctors in here, I want you to ponder this, and if you guys are being treated right now for any of these conditions, I want you to ask this question to your doctor, because we're about to turn the whole thing on its head. How many of you know somebody that is suffering from hypothyroid, hypertension? Put your hand up, hypertension. How about ADD, ADHD, or OCD? Raise your hand if you know anyone that's suffering from anxiety or depression, right? Keep your hand up if you've been told that these are genetically inherited diseases. They run in families because they're on our genes, right? Okay, so put your hands down. Do you know that we have mapped every gene in the human body? There's not one gene in a human being that we don't know. And because hypertension runs in families, and hypothyroid runs in families, and depression runs in families, we say that these are genetically inherited diseases. Next time somebody tells you you have a genetically inherited disease, ask them this question. What gene did I inherit that gave me that disease? Because if it's genetically inherited, it's carried on the genome. But if it doesn't have a gene, it's not genetically inherited, which means, guess what? It doesn't exist. So what exists is the absence of a raw material, which leads to that disease. And if we put those raw materials back into the human body, we see these conditions eviscerate, right? And I'll go, woo, I really do love you guys. You're like, like, I might die of spontaneous excitement up here. I'm like, woo, I'm wired. So what these 5 genes do is, we start here with this bottom gene. When I got this test done, I'll never forget the first call I had with Grant Cardone. He called the office, and at the time I kind of knew who he was, but I wasn't, like now I know who he is. And he said, hey, Gary, this is Grant Cardone. And I said, hey, Mr. Cardone. He said, listen, man, I don't even know who you are. I don't know what you do. I got this test done as a favor to a friend of mine. He goes, but before you start, I should just tell you, I got doctors hanging on trees, his exact words, so pardon my French. And he goes, I got personal trainers coming out of my ass. And he goes, so I've got about 8 minutes, man. Why don't you just give me your spiel? And I was like, wow, aren't you rude? I didn't actually say that, but I was thinking it. And I said, well, Grant, why don't we start by you telling me how you feel? And he said, Gary, I feel great. I'm running around the world. I'm building my empire. I feel great. I said, do you mind if I tell you what I see in your test? He said, no, go ahead. I said, well, Grant, I see a man that goes to bed exhausted, but his mind keeps him up until the wee hours of the morning, so that by the time you wake up in the morning, you're more exhausted than when you went to bed. And I said, I can see that you wake up sore and achy in the morning like you had a workout the night before when you haven't, and I bet it really bothers you when you get out of bed first thing in the morning, and the soles of your feet and ankles hurt when they touch the ground to go to the bathroom and take your first pee. I don't know anything about your love life, but libido left the building 9 months ago. And oh, yeah, I went there. Tell me you don't have time for my talk, you're going to get the full can, You're going to get the full Monty. I was like, I got 8 minutes. I'm either going to win it or lose it, so let's go. So I said, left the building 9 months ago. By the way, he's getting progressively more quiet. And then I said, and I'll bet if I was to guess, the thing that bothers you most is brain fog. He goes, what in the hell do you mean, dementia? I said, no, not dementia, brain fog. You get a great idea in the bedroom. By the time you walk to the kitchen, you wonder what the heck you're doing in the kitchen. And he was dead silent. I heard him get up and shut his office door. He took the phone off a speaker and put it to his mouth. He said, Gary, I feel like shit. I said, I know. And he said, how long will it take to fix it? I said, 8 weeks. He goes, good, here's my credit card. I'll do lotions, potions, creams, jellies, or injections. Whatever you say. And if you go back on Grant's Instagram 4 years ago, you'll see that he looked 15 years older than he does today. He doesn't look, doesn't act, doesn't perform like a 64-year-old man, because now those breaks are closed. He is supplementing for deficiency, and he is thriving like he never has before in his lifetime. Woo! So let's just walk through these 5 genes, because I bet by the time I get from the bottom to the top, I'm going to touch nearly every life in this room. The bottom gene there, the MTHFR, will not tell you what the nickname is for that gene. Not from the stage. But 44% of this room is those, because 44% of the room has that gene. MTHFR is the most common gene mutation in the world. If you have that gene mutation, that little red gene mutation, which 44% of you do, it means that you cannot process folic acid. That does not sound like a big deal until you realize that folic acid is the most prevalent nutrient in the human diet. Until you realize that folic acid is a completely man-made chemical. It doesn't occur anywhere naturally in nature. We make it in a laboratory. In 1993, the U.S. federal government decided we would spray our entire grain supply with folic acid. All white pasta, white flour, white rice, all grains are sprayed with the chemical folic acid. Folate occurs in nature. Folic acid does not. Although we don't call it sprayed with folic acid, we call it fortified or enriched. This is the leading cause of ADD, ADHD, autism, OCD, manic depression, and bipolar. Right? Because 44% of the population cannot process folic acid. What do we tell pregnant women to do when they get pregnant? What are they supposed to take? Folic acid. You give a pregnant woman with that gene mutation 1,400% of the daily allowance of folic acid, she will go nuts. And then what happens is, when the pregnancy ends, she stops taking the prenatal vitamin and the symptoms go away. So she blames it on the pregnancy and not on the vitamin. And we do this over and over and over again. So if you have that gene mutation, we need to get folic acid out of your diet, and we need to supplement you with something called methylfolate. How many of you know somebody who's suffering from anxiety right now? Right? Either you or a loved one. This is astounding to me. 44% of America is on an antidepressant. Do you know how we define depression in this country? We define depression as an inadequate supply of serotonin. So if you are low on serotonin, you are by definition depressed. So you would think that if the definition of depression is low serotonin, that the solution would be to raise serotonin. But that's not what we do. We take people that are depressed and we put them on SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So what this does is it rations what little serotonin they have. So by definition, it never raises serotonin. So by definition, it never ends depression. And this is why I have patients come in my office all the time, and I always ask them, how long have you been on antidepressants? 15, 18 years. I go, when did you think it was going to kick in? Right? So if we understand that that second gene right there, MTR, that second gene methylates serotonin. You know, serotonin is the amino acid tryptophan, the crude oil that we convert into serotonin, the gasoline. If you can't make that conversion, you're by definition low on serotonin. 90% of the serotonin resides in our gut, right? If you don't have it here, you can't have it here. But this is a very easy factory to turn back on. We can turn the serotonin and the dopamine factory back on, travels up the vagus nerve to the brain and eviscerates these kinds of conditions. If you have depression, you're not deficient in an SSRI. If you have ADHD, you are not missing Adderall. If you have high blood pressure, you're not deficient in a calcium channel blocker or a beta blocker. So if you have that second gene mutation, it's likely you're suffering from anxiety. And I can prove it to you right now, because the next time you run into someone that is suffering from anxiety, ask them these 3 questions, and I will prove that it is that gene. Number 1, have you had anxiety on and off throughout your entire lifetime? They will say yes. Number 2, can you point to the specific trigger that causes it? They'll say no. I can wake up in the morning with anxiety. I go to bed at night sometimes feeling anxious. I can be driving home from work on an otherwise innocuous day and I can be overwhelmed by anxiety. That is not coming from a cluster of symptoms. It's not coming from your outside environment. It's coming from your physiology. And we can fix it. That's true with ADD and ADHD and OCD. How many of you know somebody who is suffering from ADD or ADHD? Or a child suffering from ADD or ADHD. That's that third gene mutation right there. If you have that gene mutation, I need to supplement you with a very specific form of B vitamin, zinc, magnesium, and an amino acid called L-methionine to fix that, because attention deficit disorder is not an attention deficit at all. It's an attention overload disorder. It's too many windows open at the same time. Right? And so what happens is in the brain, we don't just create thought, we also dismantle thought. It is just as important for a human being to be able to create a thought as it is for us to be able to dismantle a thought. If we can't dismantle thoughts, the mind gets clouded. And so people that have that gene mutation will lay down to go to bed at night. They're night owls. They'll lay down to go to bed at night, and their mind will wake up. They're exhausted, but they can't sleep because their mind keeps them awake. And if you ask them what they're thinking about, it's the most innocuous little thoughts, right? It's not earth-shattering, life-changing thoughts, not loss of a loved one. It's things like, did I get everything on my grocery list today? Did my belt match my shoes, right? Did I return that Instagram post? I forgot to answer that email. What color dishes am I going to use for Thanksgiving dinner, right? I'm telling you. Am I right? Give me a woo if you do that. Yeah. Yes. This can be shut off. This is the mind not able to quiet. It's opening so many windows. So you're thinking about a job you're working on, and your friend walks up, and you're thinking about a job, and you start talking to your friend. You see a logo. It reminds you of a vacation you want to take. Now you're thinking about a job, talking to your friend, looking at the logo, thinking about a vacation you want to take. Woo! And then your friend's like, yeah, my grandma passed away on Sunday. And you're like, that's a great idea. Because you're not tuned in, but not because you have an attention deficit, because you have an attention overload. If we could quiet the mind, then these conditions would go away. People that have OCD have disorganization in the mind. They crave organization in their outside environment. People get OCD, they walk into a room, there's a sock against the wall. They can't even work on the computer until they move the sock. Yeah, I ain't the ones that are laughing. Those are the ones moving socks, right? Can't see you, but I know you're out there, right? So once we go through this genome, and if you have a break in that AHCY, that one that is green on the top, This is a propensity for addiction. How many of you know somebody who has ever been affected by addiction? Right. The thing about addiction is this: it has a tendency to shift and never really go away. Why is that? Because we don't treat the dopamine deficit. Remember, dopamine starts here, not here. And so we had a saying that the absence of dopamine is the presence of addiction. And the reason why addiction has a tendency to shift from drugs and alcohol to sex to working out to nicotine to what have you is because, to gambling, is because the dopamine deficiency is there. And you might cure the physical addiction, but you need to cure the dopamine deficit so that they can not have that signal to actually drive them to those behaviors. You show me a child that can play video games 12 hours a day, I will show you a future addict. A child is not playing the video game because he likes the video game. He's playing the video game because it makes him feel normal. This is where all addiction starts, is the search for normalcy. Very few addicts woke up one morning and said, I want to get really banged up. They said, I want to feel normal. And in the search for that dopamine ding, they developed an addiction. And no one's ever returned the dopamine to normal. So that addiction has surfed with them for the balance of their adult lifetime. And we can fix that by looking at those 5 genes. So, woo! Because so many of us are supplementing just for the sake of supplementing, right? I go into your cabinets and I see Saul Palmetto and St. John's wort and turmeric and curcumin and all of this stuff. And by the time you're done explaining to me why you're taking it all, you're as lost as I am, right? So we're asking the wrong source. We need to ask our bodies. If I could take a Q-tip and put it in your cheek and swab it 10 times, I send it into a lab. When that result comes back, you know exactly what you are deficient in. And then you put that raw material back into the human body and watch it thrive, right? Because we used to think that, dude, I really do love you guys. Like, I just want to like run out. Can I run out there and just high five some of you guys? Woo! Yeah! Love you guys! Yeah! Woo! Yes! Yes! Love you guys! All right. Yeah, baby! Yeah! Woo! Yes! Woo! They told me not to do that. So, sorry whoever had the microphone. I just couldn't help myself. I love you guys. It's amazing. So, when we put raw material back into the human body, it is astounding how well it performs, right? Mental clarity. So aside from my big, bold promise of adding 10 years or 7 years to the life of everybody in this room, and this is a large room, so I'll only be able to do it once or twice, I promised you that I would take any ailment that someone that you or a loved one suffers from, and right here on this stage in front of 4,500 people, I'll tell you exactly what is missing in their body that needs to be replaced to fix that. But before we do, I'm going to tell you how we're going to get this test, and I promise you, this used to be the time in my speech where I felt friction, because I'm going to ask you to respond to an offer. I'm going to ask you to get this genetic test done. And then we're going to go back and we're going to talk about the superhuman protocol. But if you do nothing else today, point your phone at that URL and get that test. You do it once in your lifetime. For $599, you and your family will never, ever guess again what you need to do in order to solve this. And as I was running out there, that lady was screaming about thyroid. So I'm just going to mention the thyroid real quick. That top gene that I was just talking about has to do with something called hypothyroid. How many of you know someone in your family that's suffering from hypothyroidism? Or Hashimoto's. I call it Hashi nonsense. So just a quick little lesson from the stage, and they say you should never do science from the stage. I'm going to do some science from the stage. So here's how the thyroid works, right? The thyroid produces 2 hormones. Produces something called T4, produces another one called T3. When T3 is low, we call this hypothyroid. And then we medicate the thyroid. Right? You want to talk about a pandemic? We have a pandemic of poisoning organs in the human body that have done nothing wrong. Right? We have a pandemic of poisoning human beings that have done nothing wrong. So, but here's the little known fact about the thyroid, right? It makes T4 and it makes T3, but it only makes 20% of the T3 in our blood. So wait a second, if it only makes 20% of the T3, that means there's an 80% chance that hypothyroid is not the thyroid. Yes. But in 100% of those cases, we medicate the thyroid. Right? The question is, where does the other 80% of the T3 hormone come from? It is methylated from T4. T4 is the crude oil, T3 is the gasoline. The human body turns T4 into T3. That's where 80% of it comes from. This happens outside of the thyroid. If you take the right supplements, vitamins, amino acids, minerals, nutrients, you will begin to methylate T4 into T3. It starts to rise and hypothyroid disappears. People say it to me all the time, Gary, oh my God, you fixed my thyroid. I go, I didn't fix anything. Your thyroid didn't have anything wrong with it. I didn't touch your thyroid. I fixed your methylation outside of the thyroid. This is true with hypertension. The #1 form of high blood pressure in America is called idiopathic hypertension. I love this word, idiopathic, in medicine. Because if you have no idea, you can just toss that term out. Idiopathic. Well, why do I have high blood pressure? My EKG is normal, my EEG is normal, my cardiac cath is normal, my stress EKG is normal, my dye contrast study is normal, I have normal heart and lung sounds. Why do I have high blood pressure? It's idiopathic, right? We don't know. And so what happens when you have that 4th gene mutation is you can't lower the most inflammatory compound in the human body. It's called homocysteine. And as this amino acid rises in your blood, it irritates your blood vessels and they start to clamp down. If I make the pipes smaller in a closed system, the pressure goes up. I'll say that again. You have 63,000 miles of blood vessel in your body. If I start to marginally narrow that diameter, the pressure goes up, but there is nothing wrong with the heart. But yet what do? We stand on the heart for a crime that it's not committing. I want to put an end to that. Right? Woo! Another woo. Somebody gives me a woo over here like every time. They're not even out of woos. So, you know, and as I embarked on this journey, something really very fascinating happened to me. And I really do encourage you to get this genetic test, but something fascinating happened to me in the study of the human genome and epigenetics. How many of you believe in the universal law of attraction? Okay. All right, I'm not going to get any woos on this. I might get like an unwoo, if there's such a thing. But for 22 years, I didn't believe in the universal law of attraction. I thought it was a bunch of spiritual mumbo-jumbo. I was actually saved at a Promise Keepers convention. Yeah, 24 years ago. If it wasn't for his only son, none of this would be possible. But woo! I knew I'd get some woos on that one. But you know, I stumbled upon a law in physics, and it's called constructive interference. If you ever get a chance, look up this law, constructive interference. What it says is that if 2 frequencies of equal wavelength meet, the size of the frequency doubles, which means that you can get energy from conversation. You can get energy from what I'm saying to you right now, right? I'm definitely getting energy from you guys. I mean, woo! So if equal frequencies meet and the size of the frequency doubles, so I started digging into that. I was like, well, that kind of makes it sound like it supports the universal law of attraction. What we put out, we receive. So I started digging down the spiritual rabbit hole of the law of attraction, and I started to stumble on some really valid clinical studies, and one of them is called the Spain Scale of Emotion, S-P-A-N-E. What this study did was it took 25,000 human beings and put them in a room called a Faraday's cage. It's devoid of frequency, and they measured the frequency leaving a human being's body. And they were able to measure frequency with such accuracy that they could actually isolate specific emotional states. A practitioner 2 buildings away on a different floor could tell if that person was not just angry, but they were experiencing despair or jealousy or resentment, or if they were vengeful. They could tell the difference between passion, elation, joy, and arousal. That is how deeply they were able to isolate frequency. Does anyone know what the most powerful frequency to leave a human being's body is? 4 times more powerful than love, yes. It is the frequency of authenticity. Authenticity only happens when 2 things occur. Your words are truthful, and you believe what you're saying, right? That is part of the reason why you're receiving my message right now, because what I'm saying is true, and I deeply believe what I'm sharing with you, right? So I say, if you know, all these people that have taken the stage today before me and the monster that's going to take the stage after me, don't admire them for their success or what they've done or what they've built or how much money they've made. Admire them for their authenticity, right? Because authenticity is the most powerful frequency to leave a human being's body. We say that women are more intuitive. How many of you have heard that? Okay, that's not true. Women are more sensitive to frequency. We call this intuition, right? They are actually more sensitive to frequency. Have you ever had your spouse, if you're a guy, I'm just going to pick on the guys for a minute. You ever had your spouse tell you, something wrong with that dude? I'm telling you, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. Within 6 months, you're going to be taking that knife out of the back. Every time my fiance Sage has told me that without failure, it has happened. I'm like, he has such nice shoes. He's got a Louis Vuitton satchel. He's got it. You can't have a Louis Vuitton satchel and not be like a super nice dude. And then I'm pulling it out of my back. Right? So this is the frequency of authenticity. So one thing I want to do, because I've learned this, I'm actually producing a documentary with Joe Dispenza, if any of you are familiar with Joe Dispenza. Woo! So we're finished filming in September, and Dr. Bruce Lipton, if you're familiar with him, it's going to air next year. So I hope you guys watch it. But one of the things that we're doing is we're actually taking the power of the mind and the power of the universe and the power of frequency, and we're putting this together so human beings can actually live more influential lives by understanding how to harness the power of frequency that their body sends out and actually control in a positive way their environment. So can I give you guys a little insight into what's going to pop out next year? And can I give you guys a technique that will majorly influence every human interaction you have? All right. You use this in your next sales meeting. The next time you go and ask somebody for a listing, you do this before you ask them for the listing. You will be awestruck by how good it works. You guys ready? Nope, I'm not going to do it. Thank you. You'll give me a woo. I got a lot of woos. I'm like over-wooed right now. So what we're going to do, remember, first of all, and this is the concept that we need to grasp, the human brain is, what we like to think of it as very sophisticated. It's not. It's very primal. You know what the brain cares about? The brain cares about survival. Okay? The brain does not know the difference between perception and reality. This is a fact. So in other words, if you drove home tonight and you got out of your car, and as soon as you opened your door, somebody was standing in front of you with a knife, you'd have a massive fight or flight response, right? Pupils would dilate, blood would flood your extremities, you'd sweat, your heart rate would increase, an immediate fight or flight response. But you could be living on the 30th floor of a condo and be laying in bed worried about getting eaten by a shark and have the exact same reaction, right? What are the chances of the shark getting out of the ocean, taking the elevator, coming into the bedroom, and, right? 0. No chance. But you have the exact same fight or flight response. So understand that the brain does not know the difference between perception and reality. And we can actually feed reality into our brain. It calms the neuronal signals that leave the amygdala. It heightens the state of an area called the hippocampus. It projects confidence into the prefrontal cortex, which is our future. So I'll tell you exactly how we do it. We can put ourselves into an authentic state every day. Okay, and the way that we do it, I want you to sit comfortably and face towards me. Put your hands on your legs. We're going to do one round of deep breath work, right? And by the way, every day there's one thing I never, ever, ever miss. I will miss a flight to not miss breath work. I breathe every morning because I believe in, oxygen. The presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. So if you'd like, I'll teach you that breathing technique. We're going to take 5 deep breaths, okay? At the end of the 5th deep breath, we're going to exhale. We're going to hold for about 10 seconds. And then we're going to take a deep breath in. We're going to hold for 10 seconds, and then we're going to let it out. And I'll teach you the next 2 things that we do. And I promise you, if you do this before your next meeting, you will be absolutely awe-inspired by how well this works. Okay, so let's do the 5 breaths. You ready? Obnoxiously in. If you're lightheaded, that shows you how deprived of oxygen your brain is right now. If your fingers and toes are tingling, that's how how little oxygen tension is in your tissues. Let's take a deep breath in. Now let it out. So before any meeting, any interaction, any conversation that you're going to have of any consequence, I want you to just take 10 seconds and do 5 deep breaths. And the next thing you're going to do is we're going to set our intention. Most of us don't actually set 10 seconds to just set our intention before a meeting. So our brain is going into unknown territory. What we're going to do is trick the brain right now into thinking this meeting has already happened. This outcome has already occurred. I have already been here, and this is a foregone conclusion. That's what's going to happen. So, woo! So a man thinketh, he shall become, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to set our intention. What is the intention of this meeting? Is your intention to have them give you a listing? Is your intention to have them extend the trust and confidence that it takes to actually put a multi-million-dollar property in your lap? Is your intention to get this employee to work for you? Is your intention to calm the friction in the office? What is the intention of this engagement? Right? Like before I got on this stage, I was backstage in the room. I did my breathing exercises. When I got to the ladder right there, I said, my intention today is to add value to this office, to this audience. I'm going to take that stage and I'm going to add value. And then I saw you receiving that value in a very positive way, which gave me the energy, and it took all of the angst and the anxiety and the fear of standing up in front of 4,500 people. Right? I'm very calm because my brain thinks I've already been here. So we're going to set our intention. What is the intention of that meeting? So write that down. Set my intention. Just 5 deep breaths. My intention is to gain their trust and confidence and to have them extend me this listing. And then the most important, visualize the outcome. Never visualize the meeting. Visualize the outcome. Visualize them shaking your hand and congratulating you. Visualize yourself thanking them for having the trust and confidence to trust you with this asset. Visualize your employees accepting that information as beneficial and not as critical coaching. Visualize your children receiving that message in the tone of love and not as a tone of criticism, and watch what happens to that interaction, because you have now put yourself in an authentic state, and that frequency is powerful enough to change the state of another human being. Yeah. Awesome. Did you guys find that helpful? Woo! Okay. So I hope you have already clicked on that URL, because I want to send this genetic test to every single person in this room. I want every single one of you to stop guessing what you need to not have deficiency in your body. I want you to do this for your children, because a lot of kids are affected by ADD and ADHD and OCD and learning disabilities and autism. And I want to see that eviscerate, and I want to see us thrive. And so, well, yes. I got a yes and a woo. So I've got 10 minutes left. I want to heal this audience. I want you guys to ask me any question that you're dealing with, you or a loved one is dealing with. Yes, ma'am, right here in the front, in the white. You can ask the question, I'll repeat it. I have a type 1 diabetic son. So the thing about type 1 diabetes is that the pancreas is not producing insulin, right? It's the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Type 2 is usually called adult onset. Type 1 is child onset, youth onset. So did the pancreas ever work? Was he ever able to produce insulin? He was 4.5 years old. This is excellent news. You see, here's what modern medicine would have you believe, that organ is dead. You see, but if it was dead, they'd have to take it out. By the virtue of the fact that it's still in his body, it is still alive. It is dormant. It is not dead. Right? Necrotic tissue we have to remove from the body. You cannot leave dead tissue in the body. It will cause a life-threatening infection. So if the pancreas is still in there, the pancreas can be reawoken. I want you to send me a direct message on Instagram. I'm going to tell you about exosomes and stem cell therapy. Tony wrote an entire book on this, and I know he's taking the stage after me, and we've had very positive outcomes for type 1 diabetics. Yes, ma'am, or sir, standing in the aisle right there. Chronically high LDL cholesterol, that's low-density lipoprotein and triglyceride. So here's the myth about cholesterol, guys. I mean, I'll tell you this right now. Cholesterol is the most maligned and misunderstood compound in the entire human body. right? We have been taught that high cholesterol leads to cardiovascular disease, and that's not true. There's no published evidence anywhere in the peer-reviewed clinical literature linking elevated levels of LDL cholesterol on their own to cardiovascular disease, right? You have to have a corresponding increase in triglyceride, right? So it's actually not the amount of cholesterol in your blood, it is the size of the cholesterol molecule that matters. The smaller cholesterol gets, the more dangerous it gets. The larger it is, the healthier it is. So the question is, how do we drive down the size of cholesterol? I'm sorry, how do we drive up the size of cholesterol? We drive down the triglyceride, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. This is an insulin issue, not a triglyceride issue, because when insulin rises in the bloodstream, we think insulin's primary role is to lower blood sugar. That's not true. The primary role of insulin is to block any other form of energy use in the body. If insulin is high, you cannot burn fat. It includes fat in the blood. People that eat the most sugar have the highest blood fat. So we're going to bring insulin down, lower the triglyceride, increase the size of cholesterol, and that will be a marker for longevity, not for living too short. Yes, waving your hand right there.
My child just developed epilepsy. He's 14, and I'm desperate for answers.
Yeah, so epilepsy is an issue where two sides of the brain receive the same information at different speeds. Human beings have stereoscopic vision, so if this eye and this eye take the same image in at different speeds and it crosses the vestibular cortex, hits the opposite side of the brain, it shorts out, right? The brain likes to receive stimuli, but it likes to receive it in an orderly manner. This is an issue with the vestibular cortex, the viscosity in the vestibula of the brain, right? Because if messages can't cross from one side to the other at the right speed, they channel at different rates. And the same image coming in from the same eye or from the same ears or from the same sides of the body gets to the opposite side of the brain at different times. And this is what triggers epilepsy if it's not tied to a female menstrual cycle. And I think you said it was woman. So if you would send me a DM on Instagram, I'd also love to get you with Dr. Sartor, our lead clinic director. Yes, sir. Whew. He received a cancer diagnosis while he was here. Why don't we do this, guys? Why don't we put our hands on the shoulders of the people around us right now? Let's bow our heads. And first of all, let's appeal to the highest source that we know. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we ask that you hear the prayers of the people in this room, that you lift this man up, that you heal him because his purpose has not yet been fulfilled. I'm going to answer his question, and I beg that you channel through me at this moment to give him the information he needs to change his life. And we ask that you watch over him and his family in your son, Jesus' name, amen. All right, so, boy, I didn't see that coming. Woo! I'm not supposed to talk about politics, religion, or the vaccine, but let's go. Woo! I am absolutely covered in goosebumps. Come on, Heavenly Father, let's go. So I will give you some good news about cancer, right? I am on an absolute mission right now. Grant Cardone has given me the blessing of the financial capital to spread this dream across the country. We're in the process of opening 390 franchises across America and eventually on our way to 1,000. And can I go back on the slide here? Beep, beep. No. Okay, usually I can do it with my mind, but it's not working. So I want to tell you about something called superhuman protocol. I glossed over it earlier, but the superhuman protocol is a combination of magnetism, oxygen, and light. You see, the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. This entire protocol costs about 150 grand. I do not expect anyone in this audience to spend 150 grand on this. But those three items right there will be available in every single clinic that we put across the country. And if you Google, thank you, if you Google around about it, you can probably find other clinics near you that have these modalities. We take everything from Mother Nature that outside and we bring it in. Magnetism from a PEMF mat. Do you know that in 16 minutes you can alkalize all 32 trillion cells in the human body? 16, it's a complete fallacy that you can get alkaline by drinking alkaline water. Throw that myth right out the window. Right? You cannot take the properties from one thing, move the properties to another thing, and expect them to stay in the thing that they started. Right? If I have a glass of salt water and a glass without salt, and I take the salt from this glass and put it in this glass, it can't still be here. Alkalinity doesn't transfer. pH is a charge. It stands for potential hydrogen. So the way that you change the charge in the human body is you lay on a PEMF mat for 16 minutes. You can do this every day and wake up alkaline every morning. The second thing we do is we use that hypermax oxygen. You put a respirator on and you breathe 95% O2 for 10 minutes, and then you move into a red light therapy bed. That red light therapy bed will drive oxygen right into the mitochondria. And there is nothing that cancer hates worse than oxygen. Nothing that cancer hates worse than oxygen. Do you know that when you get inside the cell of a human body, there's a little organelle called the mitochondria? You ever heard of that? Okay, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. 10% of your body weight is mitochondria. We have 110 trillion of these in the human body. So what happens is, inside the mitochondria is a little motor. It's spinning around. It's called the Krebs cycle. If you took high school biology, I'm bringing you back to some really dark days. Because I hated learning this. I was like, how does that ever apply to life? And now I'm fascinated by it. But so the Krebs cycle is a motor. It's spinning around. Every time the Krebs cycle makes one revolution, it has two choices. It can either give your body 2 units of energy, or it can give your body 32 units of energy. It's either 16 times less efficient or 16 times more efficient. Do you know what gives that mitochondria 16 times more power? Oxygen. It's called aerobic versus anaerobic respiration. Every one of you guys knows this because aerobic respiration takes in oxygen, spits out carbon dioxide. Anaerobic takes in carbon dioxide, spits out lactic acid, makes the muscles burn. So if I can use these modalities to keep you in aerobic respiration, then we can force cancer from the body, right? So let's go, baby. Okay, I've got 1 minute and 40 seconds, so and Pink Panther right there with the big pink thing. And then I'll ask you, yes, you're... let me get to this guy. Go ahead. Yes. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's 12 years ago. So here's the interesting thing about Parkinson's. Parkinson's is a progressive demyelination disorder, right? You can think of a nerve as a copper wire inside of a rubber sheath. We used to think that if we nicked that rubber sheath and the nerve arced, or we stripped that rubber sheath and the nerve was exposed and began to give resting tremors and pill rolling tremors like you have in dysdiadochokinesia, that this was not reversible. We know now that that's not the case, right? Nerves are myelinated through a process called methylation. So I would really encourage you to Google methylation and Parkinson's. It's linked to a gene mutation that causes these nerves to demyelinate and accelerate that disease. So if you'd like, you could also send me a DM on Instagram, and I'll get you with our physician that helps with methylating people that have this condition. The body can heal itself. Boy, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for what I spit from this stage. I need all Tony's bodyguards. Are you guys available after this? One more, yes, ma'am.
My husband is 33 years old, and 1 year ago he had a stroke-like event that he was hospitalized for, had to relearn how to walk, luckily only over a few days, and every neurologist, doctor, every modern medicine has said he is quote-unquote completely normal, but the left half of his body is still completely numb. No one can tell us what to do, and we've kind of not given up, but we don't know where to go.
Man, I hate to ask this question from the stage. Was he vaccinated?
He was not vaccinated.
Okay. So
he was hospitalized.
Okay.
Due to that, but he had pneumonia, and I don't know what they pumped into him. But this happened 3 weeks after that.
Yeah, that's okay. I want you to look into something called, because I'm at 0 time, hyperhomocystinemia. Hyperhomocystinemia. It's vascular spasm secondary to elevated levels of the amino acid homocysteine, and it occurs in the same areas where strokes and blood clots and embolisms and vascular embolisms occur, and it mimics that condition without actually having the physical presence of an embolism. I'll be happy to talk to you about it at the break.
Thank you. Please.
All right, guys, I know that you guys have a monster speaker coming up. I mean, thank you for your time. You've been an amazing audience.